All right. Good afternoon to everyone. I'm proud to be joined by Senators Murray, Stabenow, and Rosen. So later today, the Senate's going to have a chance to make our community safer. That is, if Republicans still believe what they said a few years ago. Martin Heinrich will come to the floor and attempt to pass a federal ban on bump stocks. I'm also proud to support it. As you know, the MAGA Supreme Court reversed a Trump ruling to ban bump stocks, a radical decision that endangers our communities and law enforcement. Last week's decision is another warning that this MAGA court is going off the deep end on issue after issue, aligning with the most extreme elements of the hard right. I'll let Senator Rosen explain how deeply heart-wrenching this decision is, as she knows too well. So today's UC, it's not a simple choice, it's a life-saving one. I beg our Republican colleagues to truly reflect on the ramifications of today's UC. On reproductive freedom. Yesterday, I took the first step for the Senate to vote on the Reproductive Freedom for Women Act, led by Senator Murray and co-sponsored not just by me, but every single female Democratic senator. The measure affirms a woman's fundamental right to choose, calls for enshrining the protections of Roe into law, which most Americans support. As Majority Leader, I'll work with my colleagues to bring it to the floor as soon as possible. Our crusade on reproductive rights will continue when we return to session after the July 4th break. As we approach the two-year anniversary of Roe v. Wade being overturned, this month was meant to be one of bipartisanship, when the Senate came together to protect the rights of millions of Americans' reproductive freedoms. Could have been a month when both sides came together to pass common-sense legislation protecting reproductive care, like contraception and IVF. Could have been a month when we put to rest the worries of millions of Americans across America enduring attacks on their reproductive freedoms in the aftermath of Roe. But instead, June has been a month of MAGA Republicans showing their true colors as their attacks on women, on families, on reproductive rights comes to light. They were told by some of their right-wing pro-life leadership, keep your mouths shut. We're going to force them to vote. If they don't want to talk about it, if they run away from questions when you ask them, they're still going to have to vote. And that's what matters most to the American people. In the last few weeks, Senate Republicans have shown that for all their attempts to sound moderate on reproductive care, when it comes to voting, they choose MAGA extremism over the American people. So, when Republicans blocked federal protection for contraception a few weeks ago, they chose MAGA extremism over the American people. When Republicans blocked federal protections for IVF a few days ago, they chose MAGA extremism over the American people. And when Donald Trump to this day continues to brag about working with the Senate Republicans to confirm 3 hard-right, vehemently anti-choice Supreme Court justices to eliminate Roe, that's choosing MAGA extremism over the American people. But we're telling our Republican colleagues, you cannot run away from the truth. Your record on women's health care is outright abysmal, shameful, and out of step with most Americans. Senator Murray.
Thank you, Leader Schumer. You know, the American people have seen a really sharp contrast when it comes to reproductive rights over the past few weeks. Democrats introduced legislation to protect the right to birth control. Republicans voted no. Democrats introduced legislation to protect the right to IVF. Republicans voted no. And don't forget, twice we have tried to pass legislation restoring Roe, and twice Republicans refused. So yesterday we introduced a bill that simply says women should be free to make their own health care decisions. It couldn't be more basic. I mean, if you care at all, even a little, about letting women make decisions about their own pregnancies that are right for them and their families, you should support that bill. Republicans are probably going to try to spin this, but make no mistake, we are going to put them on the record. If Republicans want to call this a messaging bill, well, the message is simple. Here is who stands for reproductive freedom and here is who does not. And if Republicans want to pretend there is no threat to reproductive rights, well, no one is falling for that shtick. Not when so many Republicans support extreme fetal personhood laws that treat a frozen embryo the same as a living, breathing person. Not when Republicans are listening to quote-unquote experts who think birth control like IUDs are the same as abortion. Not when they have written something like Project 2025, which I spoke about earlier today. It is a literal plan for Trump to attack abortion nationwide. And we certainly are not going to let Republicans off the hook when we are already living with the painful reality inflicted on women by Republicans' anti-abortion extremism. Truly heartbreaking stories have been making national news ever since Dobbs. We've seen them all. We will never forget them. And as I said at our HELP hearing a few weeks ago, a forced pregnancy does not have to make headlines to make someone's life a living hell. This is not going to go away. If Republicans are going to force women to stay pregnant, we are going to force them to be honest with the American people about their extreme position. And Democrats are going to keep fighting to restore the rights the American people have been so clear that they want back.
Monday is the 2-year anniversary of the decision to rip away women's reproductive freedoms in this country through the Dobbs decision made by the Trump Supreme Court. So now, at this moment, my daughter has fewer freedoms than I have had. My 2 little granddaughters have less freedoms in making their own decisions than I had. This is serious. It's not a sideshow, it's not a side issue. It's a fundamental issue. And since the fall of Roe, they've continued their assault, as we've heard, on access to birth control, to IVF, to severe and total restrictions on abortion. In fact, today, 1 out of 3 women of childbearing age live in a state with extreme and dangerous Trump abortion bans. And they want that to be everywhere. That is the goal, whether it's legislatively or by using a 100-year-old law to try to create a way for Trump to do it administratively. In our state of Michigan, 2 years ago, we worked really hard. We put together a ballot initiative, put it on the ballot to protect our reproductive freedoms in Michigan, to make our own decisions, and it passed. Overwhelmingly it passed, including creating not only a re-election of our governor, Democratic governor, but for the first time in 40 years, a Democratic House and Democratic Senate. Why? People wanted to make sure those freedoms were protected, and the state laws were changed, and it became very clear. So people in Michigan think we're okay. But unfortunately, with the national abortion ban or Donald Trump re-elected and doing something administratively, we're not okay. Nobody's okay in this country. Not one state, whether you're in a state that has state laws or a state constitution protecting your freedoms, or whether you're in a state that does not. The reality is that none of that will matter, and every woman in every state is at risk. So this is a all hands on deck moment. My colleagues and I have been working with President Biden and Vice President Harris to protect our reproductive freedoms, and that's why, frankly, we have been holding the votes that Senator Schumer talked about in terms of the right to birth control. Can't believe I'm saying that in 2024, the right to birth control in our country, the right to IVF to start or expand your family. And they have stopped us at every step, and now we're going to see. The next vote will be on protecting the basic reproductive freedoms for women in this country, and we'll see where they stand. For us, we know where we stand. Democrats are working every day to defend our freedom to make decisions about our own health, not a politician, not a judge. The women of this country should have the freedom to make our own decisions about our own health, our lives, and our futures. And we're not going to give up until we have those freedoms fully protected.
Well, thank you, Senators Schumer, Murray, and Stabenow. But before I turn back to the issue of reproductive rights, I want to quickly address the Supreme Court's recent decision on bump stocks. My community, my city, my state were forever changed on 1 October, and saying that banning bump stocks solves a fake problem. It's disgraceful and it's offensive. We lost Nevadans that day. 60 people were killed in the largest mass shooting in American history. Families were torn apart. For us, the carnage created by bump stocks is very real. So shame on anyone who says it's a fake problem. The Trump-era ban was common sense, and it saved lives. We now have a responsibility to make it permanent in federal law, and I call on all of my colleagues to let this legislation move forward today. Now, I'm going to talk about another critically important issue for Nevadans. Overturning Roe v. Wade was just the beginning of the nonstop attacks against reproductive freedom. In the years since, anti-choice politicians have pushed and pushed to restrict reproductive rights and ban abortion, including by passing a national abortion ban. They want to pass a national abortion ban right here in Congress. I've lived in Las Vegas for 50 years, and I'd bet the house that anti-choice Senate Republicans will vote to ban abortion nationwide if they're given the chance. And so just because many of them are they're just suddenly changing their tune, they're refusing to talk about this issue, it does not mean they won't vote for a nationwide abortion ban as soon as they're given the chance. So if you believe the extremists who pushed for years to overturn Roe, if you believe the extremists who said they were 100% life, those same extremists who advocated for state bans now agree in an election year not to pass a national abortion ban. Well, I have some oceanfront property in Las Vegas to sell you. None of us here will be fooled by their cover-ups of their anti-choice records. Instead, Senate Democrats, we're going to keep working to restore Roe. We'll keep working to protect access to birth control, and we'll keep working to protect IVF for those folks who want to start a family. And we'll keep fighting to make sure that women, and not extreme politicians, have the freedom to make their own health care decisions. Thank you.
Okay, we're ready. Yes, young lady over there. Yeah, in the flower dress with a lot of colors. I think it's flowers. Look, first the administration is reviewing that particular equipment, but after that they sent over $1 billion in aid to Israel. I've always had 4 goals in terms of Israel policy. 1, Hamas must be radically reduced. 2, we must free the hostages. 3, we got to provide as much aid to the Gazan people as we can to help them in the humanitarian crisis. And 4th, we ought to minimize civilian casualties. Yes, lady over there with the glasses. Yeah, you. She doesn't have glasses, that's why I said.
Following the whole vote today on Judge Kosovo, do you have any concerns that Republicans are ramping up attacks on judicial nominees ahead of the election?
Well, today wasn't only a attendance problem. We had a number of people out for a number of different reasons. But we're going to keep moving forward on judicial nominees, and even when we haven't gotten Republican cooperation, in many instances, well, we have a record number of judicial nominees that we have nominated and put on the bench, so I'm very proud of that. Yes, Burgess.
Is it too late, do you think, in this year to pass the House's bipartisan tax deal? Is that dead in the Senate?
Look, as you know, I supported it the minute it was announced. I think it's a good bill. I was very proud that I pushed hard and got into the bill the low-income housing tax credit, near and dear to me, very important to my state, and I'm currently working with Chairman Wyden to try and get something done. It's not dead. Yes.
There's been a rise in these deepfake videos, issue with deepfake pornography, which some of our colleagues have introduced bipartisan bill. In terms of it also being a problem with President Biden, with some of these videos being taken out of context, what can Congress do to try and solve this problem, and how quickly can you act?
Well, as you know, Senator Klobuchar, in terms of the elections issue, has passed a number of bills out of committee. One was unanimous, two did have bipartisan support, and we're going to look for a way to move those bills forward. Very important bills to us. Yes, Sahil. Look, we hope that our Republican colleagues will see the light and not block the bill today. As I said, many of them were extremely supportive of this when President Trump did it as a regulation, and I'm just shocked that the Supreme Court, Donald Trump is hardly a friend of gun safety, but I'm just shocked that the Supreme Court would be even to the right of him. I promised Mr. CNN I'd call on you when I didn't answer you in the hallway. Well, sorry. Thank you, everybody. We're going to bring up the judge soon to answer your question.
Agreement was made last year. The world did not seem to be quite as much a fire as it is now. We need to react to where we're headed. Not only big power competition with China and Russia, but also Iran, and now, of course, we have the war in Israel on top of everything else. So I want to commend Senator Wicker and the bipartisan group on the Armed Services Committee who gave us a roadmap. Now the challenge is going to be to find a way to pursue the roadmap with real money.
The leader is right. The most important job we have as elected officials is the safety and security of the American people. And so I was very pleased to see Senator Wicker and members of the Senate Armed Services Committee last week in a big bipartisan way pass out legislation that increases the top line, the defense top line, by $25 billion. I've always said if you don't get national security right, the rest is really conversation. And I think it's critically important for all the reasons that the leader mentioned. We got a land war in Europe. We have Israel is at war with Hamas terrorists and Iranian proxy groups. China is increasingly aggressive. These all represent threats to the United States of America and to our people. And so it is critical, in my view, that the Senate take up the National Defense Authorization Act, and I would hope that Senator Schumer would decide to do that. I'm hoping that's the case, but if past his prologue, he will push this and try and push it to the end of the year. I don't think that accords it the priority that it deserves. I think that this legislation needs to be on the floor of the United States Senate with a robust amendment process, so individual senators have an opportunity to come and have their voices heard in this very important legislation. But the one thing I think that is clear in all this, and that is that there are some things that are more important than politics, and national security happens to be one of them. We're doing a series of show votes. We're voting on all kinds of things that are not going anywhere. There's no objective or intention to make law or to have any of these things enacted. They're all political show votes because this is an election season. America's national security is not a political issue. It is the #1 issue when it comes to defending the safety and security of the American people, and Congress should act like it.
Terrorists have arrived in America. The FBI says that lights are blinking red, warning lights. National security experts say that there is an increased risk of a coordinated attack. Why? Because the Democrats are the party of open borders. Just last week, 8 illegal immigrants were arrested with ties to the radical, extreme, violent terrorist group ISIS. They were arrested in California, Pennsylvania, and New York. They came from Central Asia to Mexico, and from there easily came to the United States. Why? Because this open border policy of the Democrats has something called catch and release. Democrats, let me tell you, it is not working. You are releasing into the United States criminals, drug dealers, murderers, and now terrorists. And for other Americans, let me tell you, we are living on borrowed time. This Biden administration and the Democrats have let 10 million illegal immigrants into our country. 10 million. Common sense will tell you that among them are additional terrorists, and Democrats have no plan to keep us safe. Last week, Joe Biden had an executive order, a feeble executive order, too little, too late. And today at the White House, Joe Biden is going to be down there with another order, which is going to provide amnesty for another 500,000 illegal immigrants. Our country is being invaded by illegal immigrants, and in this Senate, Democrats are repeatedly voting to continue this. The American people want secure borders. We want to know who's coming here. Republicans have solutions. It's finish the wall. It's stop, catch, and release, and bring back a policy that works. And that policy is called Remain in Mexico.
And I'm going to keep piling on where he left off. So, yes, once again, President Biden has rolled out the red carpet for illegal migrants. So we're hearing the doublespeak again. Out of one side of his mouth, he's saying, look at me, I'm doing an executive order. We're going to control the border. And then on the other hand now, he's offering basically mass amnesty to hundreds of thousands of illegal migrants that are currently within the country. So who's listening to this doublespeak? Well, I can tell you it's our adversaries. It's terrorist organizations, and most certainly it's the cartels. So let's just look at where we are since the executive order nearly 2 weeks ago. 2,700 illegal crossings just in the San Diego sector. Just as Senator Barrasso said, we had 8 illegals in the United States that were caught that have links to ISIS, a terrorist organization. And just most recently, we saw the horrific rape and murder of a mother of 5 by an illegal immigrant. When and where does it stop? Joe Biden, this is on you. We need to secure our border.
Well, I'm going to change it up a bit. Before I do, though, I would like to say something Senator Ernst said. Who is listening to what the president's saying with his back and forth ping-ponging on his immigration policy? I'll tell you who's going to end up listening is the court system. This is all going to the court system. None of it will be put into effect because it's going to have to be litigated, and it's all being put out in front of the American people for political fodder for the election in November. That's obvious. So there's no passion here. There's no real policy here because this is all going to be listened to by the courts in the United States and will not be even litigated before we turn the clock into 2025. But today I want to talk about something that is good news, and that is the ADVANCE Act. That is a bill that I've worked on for over a year through my EPW committee. It is in conjunction with Senators Carper and Senator Whitehouse. The House passed the ADVANCE Act by 393 to 13. What does it do? It's for advanced nuclear. We hear a lot about the solutions of energy. How are we going to meet the energy demands of tomorrow? For me, we got to have all of the above, certainly natural gas, coal, renewables, but we need nuclear and particularly the new technologies of nuclear to be a big part of our energy future. Small modular reactors are the future of nuclear energy, but we have a regulatory system right now that does not address and license these reactors quick enough. They don't have the speed nor the staff to be able to do this. But we also need to take, as the United States, the power of the world, nuclear innovation to the rest of the world. We want to be the leader here. And so the Advance Act reforms some of the NEPA process for siting nuclear, small modular nuclear. It also works on innovation of the technology. It works to speed up the licensing so we can see more of this moving forward. And it also, for areas such as mine that have abandoned power sector, maybe a coal-fired power plant that's no longer in service that has transmission, it encourages the use of those assets to be transformed into a small modular nuclear facility. They're big employers. It's green energy. It's base load energy. We have 20% of our energy now is nuclear. And so I'm excited. I'm anticipating that we will have a big bipartisan vote. This will be our economy, our energy security, and our innovation, and our environment, all wrapped into one. Thanks.
More fair and more just. That's what Joe Biden calls his immigration policies they started rolling out today. But today I ask, where is fairness and justice for Rachel Morin? She was the Maryland mom who was raped and killed by Victor Antonio Martinez Hernandez. And Hernandez wasn't just any street thug. He committed murder in El Salvador. He then came across our southern border illegally. A few weeks later, he committed a home invasion in Los Angeles. And then a few months after that, he murdered and raped Rachel Morin, a mom of 5, while she was out walking on a trail in Maryland. Eerily similar to Laken Riley's murder in February. Laken Riley was a nursing student in Georgia who was murdered while out on a run by another illegal who was just freely roaming our streets. Sadly, this is Joe Biden's America, and it's Joe Biden's border crisis. We have terrorists, we have violent criminals coming across the southern border who are raping and murdering Americans. Where is the justice for Rachel Morin? Where is the justice for Laken Riley? The American people are going to right this wrong by holding Joe Biden and Senate Democrats accountable in November.
Leader McConnell, you've seen the videos of the president in Europe and here in the States. Do you believe that these videos are deep fakes and that and is there a national security issue here in terms of how our adversaries and our allies see the ability of our commander-in-chief to make critical decisions in response to new conflicts?
Look, I think when it comes to national security, and that's what you're talking about, right, it's collective responsibility on the part of all of us to make defense spending, as I said earlier, job one. We're going to have an election this fall, and the American people can decide which of these candidates they want to lead us into the next 4 years. But whoever it is, in my view, needs to make national security the top priority.
Leader McConnell.
Alex.
Are you going to reach out to Speaker Johnson to get him on board with the Wicker proposal to increase defense spending by $25 billion? And what are the next steps to get the Appropriations Committee to come along with that number?
That's the challenge. Senator Murray has said once again she's going to insist on equal treatment for defense and non-defense. That, in my view, is absurd. It doesn't reflect current needs. The agreement that former Speaker McCarthy and the President reached has the top line in it. Whether that still makes sense a year later, given all the intervening events, is something we're going to have to try to work out. But in the end, what I feel very strongly about is we need to begin to deal in a way that Senator Wicker laid out over the next 5 years with reflecting the actual changes to our national defense needs. And there are tripwires you have to deal with in the process. Burgess?
Do you plan to attend and or speak at the Republican National Convention this summer?
National Convention?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Will you be speaking there too?
Hmm?
Speaking there?
I don't know what role I'm going to play, but I'm going to be chairman of the Kentucky delegation, as I have been for a number of years, and I'll be there. Okay.
Do you believe bump stocks should be banned legislatively?